Now, joining Hans and myself is Gage Haubrick. He's the Prairie's Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Gents, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having us on.
Now, you say that between 2013 and 2024, Frog Lakes First Nations Trust Fund here in Alberta went from $102 million down to just $9 million. Does anyone know where the money went, Hans?
No one exactly knows where the money went. That's why we had to use the courts. I did request informally with Indigenous Services Canada and my band on several occasions, but they did not respond. So we had to partner with the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. Now we're in court, and now we're fighting for transparency and accountability.
Now, the news forum reached out to Frog Lake First Nations Chief Greg Desjardins, but has yet to hear back. Hans, have you spoken to the chief at all about what happened to the money?
No, every time I try to talk to him, and on several occasions, I have invited him onto my social medias, and I went to band meetings. They actually kicked me out of a band meeting, took my mic away, and they don't respond to me whatsoever.
Wow. Now, Hans, you believe this is actually a widespread problem and far from an isolated incident. Can you explain?
It is a widespread problem. There are several communities that are facing the exact same issues of probably the First Nations. And right now, there's a trend across First Nation communities where activists and chieftain councils are fighting for transparency and accountability.
So you've talked to other First Nations communities explicitly, and they're sharing a lot of the same problems with you then?
Yes, I have.
Now, Hans, you're a band member, and you say not a lot of the money which was taken from the Frog Lake First Nations Trust Fund went to actually help those in need in your community.
No, the thing is that we don't exactly know where the money went, and that's the big issue. That's why we're going for accountability and transparency at the moment, and the chief and council won't explain what's going on. So this is why we're in court for that.
So, in your opinion, Hans, where's the money most needed at the Frog Lake First Nation here in Alberta?
Um, like I said, accountability and transparency is first, but it should be going to the people. But again, we have to go to courts before we can uh, make actual assumptions on what's going on with the monies.
Now, where did a lot of the revenue come from to build up such a strong trust fund over the years?
Um, well, from the consolidated audited documentations that they do have, a lot of it came from oil revenue that we have, and it was in our own band trust account.
Okay. Now, Gage, why the partnership with Hans and taking the federal government to court?
Yeah, so obviously, we think it's extremely important, as Hans has mentioned, that accountability and financial transparency happen all across the country. If you're a taxpayer in any municipality, anywhere else in Alberta or anywhere else in Canada for that matter, you can go to a government website, you can find out how politicians are spending your money, but that's not the case for a lot of First Nations communities. So we partner with Hans because, of course, we want Hans to be able to get the documents from this trust fund to find out what exactly happened to that 100 odd million that could have been used to help his community. But also we want to try and put forward that broader principle is that if money is being held in trust for a band and they're not being clear about where that money is going, is that band members have a right to know how it's being used, and the federal government has a right to help band members get that information.
Now, you were both just in Vancouver filing. Where do things stand right now in regards to the court case?
Yeah, exactly. So we went and we had the hearing a couple of days ago. You know, our lawyers presented our case in front of a judge about why we think it's so important that these documents be released. And now the judge has reserved decision. So we're waiting about a month or a little bit more to try and figure out exactly what the ruling is going to be on this. But, you know, of course, we are always hoping that the judge will see that how important this is that Hans gets access to this type of information. And we're hoping for a good outcome there.
Now, Hans, you initially named Frog Lake First Nation as a respondent to this case, but discontinued the application against the First Nation back in October of 2023. Why is that?
I'd like to pass this question on to my colleague Gage to answer that.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, the way that we tried, so after Hans used his informal procedures to ask the band for the information for the trust fund, we then filed those access to information requests with the federal government because the federal government has those documents in trust for the band. So the reason that we decided to focus on the federal government is because it's a much clearer act looking at the Access to Information Act. as a way to try and get those documents instead of trying to muddy things up with a bunch of different court cases where we thought we're clearly going against the federal government, and having Ottawa use their duty to help band members here would be a much clearer, better way to try and get to success.
So, gentlemen, let me ask both of you, do you feel that this could be precedent setting for other First Nations communities across Canada?
Well, we certainly hope so. That's the most important thing here is that, of course, we want to help hands out, and that's why the CTF partnered with him to get the specific documents he needs on his First Nation. But we're also hoping to set that larger principle for First Nations communities across the country is that when they go looking with questions about how their community is spending their money, that both local leaders and the federal government step up to the plate and help them find out what's going on there.
Hans McCarthy with the Frog Lake Alberta First Nation and Gage Hobrick with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.